Most welcome on the second day, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Yeah. Good morning to you.
Good morning to all, sir. So we can start now, sir.
Yes.
Students are here.
Fine, sir. Fine.
Okay. Fine.
Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir. Audible.
All right. So today's talk is a continuation of what I did yesterday, where we're trying to understand Aurobindo's vision. As I said, you have many phases to Aurobindo, so it will be extremely difficult. So that we are estimating these ideas in a way, we need to understand that thinkers would, would function differently at different time periods. So you might find opinions either coinciding or they would be at a variance. And that's absolutely normal because even if you look at people like Gandhi, you would find a huge difference in terms of positions when we are estimating him, say, somewhere around 1920s, or Gandhi in South Africa, or the later Gandhi during the Quit India movement, the Gandhi during the Pune Pact. They are very, very different in terms of how they respond to certain realities around them. The same would be with B.R. Ambedkar. Of course, I will be looking at both of them in relation with Sri Aurobindo ahead in my PPT. But it's sufficient before I begin to tell you that there might be huge phases within Aurobindo. All right, so don't take my talk to be the absolute. It's not the absolute, nor is it, nor is it. Yeah, it might critically look at Aurobindo, yes, but it's not specific to a certain period. Remember, though I would keep my talk somewhere with Aurobindo's ideas between 1929 and 1940. All right. So this would be that possible period where I'm trying to locate him. All right. But there are many phases to Aurobindo. So if you look at it, say from when he returns back from India and he takes an appointment at Baroda College with Maharaja Sayaji Rao Gaikwad, who was the head of Baroda state, then who actually gives him the principalship of Baroda College. See that period from 1893 or 1890s up to 1910, 1915. All right, that's a very different period with Aurobindo, where he's still in that process of discovery. And then you have that a period from say 1910s right up to 22, 25. That's his revolutionary thing. So you're going to have a very different Aurobindo talking about a possible India ahead, or his nature of his political ideas would be extremely different from the later Aurobindo. All right, though his views on education would be pretty consistent, right, from 1893, right? But these periods are very different. So I'm trying to locate him within this particular, say, between 1930s and 1940s, right? Say, give or take a couple of years here and there, but say a time period of 15 years, which is where I'm trying to locate it. But as I said, it's not absolute because you're going to find a different man at different periods in time. All right, so we need to be careful of that when we are estimating contributions, specifically within history. Yes. Now, I come from the discipline of comparative literature, and coming in from the discipline of comparative literature, uh, we are slightly, this discipline is slightly different in terms of methodology from say a course like English or any single language discipline. Slightly different. It's different in the sense that we might not have the kind of disciplinary barriers that certain nationalistic literatures might have. So if I say British literature, or if I say French literature, or Italian literature, Japanese, single language, let us say, where this notion of nation and nationalism is underwriting language, that kind uh, of a barrier is not there within comparative literature. All right, mainly because of the nature of the discipline itself. In the sense, it's nearly a 200-year-old discipline, but still very much a part of your growth of colonialism. That's where comparative literature comes up in a major way. But I won't talk about that right now. But what I need to mention is we look at uh, methodologies in a big way. So comparative literature would be about methodologies. What kind of methodologies are you following? Are you evolving a new methodology, or are you picking up an existing methodology around? And because we work across disciplines, whether it's sociology, whether it is political science, or we work within history in a big way, uh, we might start using certain methodologies within from the discipline that we are looking at. So we might look at ethnography and sociological theory within if you're looking at a sociological subject, or we might use hardcore political theory if we're looking at political science. So so in a way, I just wanted to bring out a way of looking at the notion of the nation, because India's rebirth, what Aurobindo has been talking about, what Gandhi is talking about, what Subhash Chandra Bose is talking about, what Ambedkar talks about, you know, Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya is talking about, the Liaquat brothers are talking about, the huge number of people, K.M. Munshi, they're all talking about a certain India. Yeah. Now, the moment I use the word nation in terms of birth, rebirth, in terms of how it's going to evolve, we normally have a very post-colonial idea of a nation. Yes, if I remember Omi Baba, specifically his nations and narrations, if you can just remember that first opening line, all right, of that introduction, how does it go? It says, nations like narrations. If I just remember it, I hope my memory is pretty cranky nowadays. And see it. Yeah, nations like narrations lose themselves in the midst of time, and they're only visible in the mind's eye, right? And now that this is an interesting formulation what Baba is bringing about. I mean, it's ahistorical, all right? Uh, it talks about narratives, but we have no idea where do you locate it, and that's a larger problem with the post-colonial understanding of the nation. I'll be talking about it in one of my slides ahead. But what I'm doing here is I'm getting into the field of international relations just to understand what a nation means. Because we can't talk about birth and rebirth, and we can't talk about India, the possible way India is going to evolve ahead with a vision. Remember, that was born in the 1920s and 1930s. So when we're talking about Aurobindo and his vision, it's largely something that was present in terms of dynamics in the 1920s and 30s, and it's 2024 today. Yes, so we have a very different kind of a dynamics, and we are trying to understand as to how can we keep Aurobindo, or how can we keep Gandhi, or how can we keep Ambedkar relevant within the present dynamics. And it will be a huge mistake if we're going to bring the past into the present without some form of synthesis of trying to understand, because I mean it's an age of globalization. Even globalization is getting challenged now with that kind of force. So it's very very important to provincialize the past in a way, to start reassessing the past, relooking the past, but at the same time keeping the present dynamics in mind, so that this problem of time periods and the problems where the dynamics which inform these discourses need to be relevant. All right. So what we are doing is, so when we talk about the nation in comparative literature, in one of my courses, many of the courses that I teach, and I teach courses in political theory, uh, specifically in South Asia. All right, so political theory, we are looking at political theory within South Asia. So one of my courses that I teach at the PhD coursework, but we're trying to understand the nation state, and we're trying to look at it within international relations as to how is a nation state defined. See, there's a cultural idea of the nation that is very very important. Yes, but just the idea of culture is not going to define you as a nation state. So how are we looking at the idea of the nation state within within political theory, right? So mostly when we say nation state, remember it is just a few introductory slides, 3 or 4 of them, just to fix your nation state idea. So we normally look at it in terms of sovereign territory. We're looking at it in terms of defined borders, and we're looking at it in terms of centralized governments. Remember, when I say a state, I'm normally talking about sovereign territory with a form of government. All right? It could be anything. It could be a democracy. It could be an oligarchy. It could be a dictatorship. It could be a federal system. It could be whichever way you want to look at it. It could be a theocratic state, whatever. But you need a settled territory, a sovereign territory, and you need a form of government which is looking at it. Yes, at the same time, you need to have what's understood as a settled population, number one, right? And largely, it is the form of government which looks at uh, policies and decision making, right? So a nation state is defined this way. Now, there are huge challenges to it also, all right? So when we say nation states are challenged, globalization challenge has challenged it and is challenging it in a big way. At the same time, you have a huge number of non-state actors. At the same time, you have a huge number of organizations within the international system which is looking at it. Just to brief you all on this, and you have some very specific theoretical constructions within IR, which is looking at nation states. All right, so we look at the idea of realism, all right, where the first nature of how we're looking at the world is in a state of anarchy. So anarchy is the cornerstone of realism, all right. So so most nation states, I mean, we are talking about culture here. We are talking about Aurobindo here. We are talking about Gandhi. We are talking about a cultural idea of India. We are talking about a spiritual idea of India. Yes, but at the same time, you would have a very, very hardcore realist view that government agencies have as to what India is, what is the sovereignty of India, how do you protect India, and so on and so forth. Same way, the other nation states also. So they would have a realist vision, right? And primarily because it's an anarchic world. It's hugely an anarchic world, right? And see, the idea is, can you relate this idea with Aurobindo's notions or Gandhi's notions, or the idea of what Ambedkar brought about with the notion of India? Was it an anarchic world for them? What was the realistic estimate each of these three thinkers brought in? How did Gandhi look at it in terms of realism? How does Aurobindo look at it in terms of realism? But of course, it's a colonial state there. How does Ambedkar look at it? How do they negotiate in a realistic way? But how do they negotiate using other notions to negotiate their way through those imperial policies? That's very, very crucial. So, in a sense, you need to learn how to relate these ideas, and you need to make an older discourse contemporary. That's important. As I said, a discourse that came from the 1920s and 30s, whether it's Gandhi, Ambedkar, or Aurobindo, need to be made relevant, right? And the only way you're going to make it relevant is to look at the existing nature of the world around us and try to estimate them within that particular condition. Only then it is possible. Otherwise, it's museology. You're trying to, it's like a museological construct. You go to a museum, you see sculptures, in the same way you're going to see discourses. They might not be relevant in today's times. All right? So that's something very, very crucial. How do you make it relevant? So realism would do that. In a sense, it would look at the idea of national interest as to how it constructs behavior, and that's extremely paramount. Then we talk about, within IR, we might talk about liberalism. So the role of the international system is extremely crucial. So we look at cooperation among institutions, we look at the idea of trade, we look at the idea of democracy, we try to reduce conflicts through trade. We are engaging in terms of multilateralism, so a large number of connections with other institutions within the international system. At the same time, you're also looking at your notion of domestic values. All right, so if you look at a huge amount of theories of democracy, you will find liberalism to be a major idea that's happening. All right. The same way we have something called constructivism that happens within IR theory as to how different ideas would construct and define a nation state. All right. And then you have, of course, Marxism and the nation state, because remember, for nearly 40 years, 50 years, half the world was Marxist. Yes. Where you're trying to understand global capitalism, you're also trying to understand how uh, capitalism is used by the nation state to maintain economic dominance and so on and so forth. Yes. Idea of exploitation is extremely central within Marxist theory. All right, and then we have something called, I forgot to add the title, where a very important part of IR theory would be feminism, right? So feminist notions of how a nation state is constructed. For example, remember, India, most nation states are either constructed on a masculine platform or on a feminine platform. Yes? For example, Germany would be masculine, so it's the fatherland there. Soviet Russia, uh, specifically after the Bolshevik War, was a masculine construct. It's still the fatherland. India is constructed on the feminine. So we are looking at it as the idea of the mother. All right. So the nature of the mother, or the idea of the maternity principle, is extremely crucial when we're looking at India as a nation state. So in a sense, we're looking at gender, which is shaping IR, but at the same time, it's looking at women who might not be privileged within a larger patriarchal order. Yeah, because much of IR would be very patriarchal. Much of your nation state, it's hugely muscular. Yeah, so your the feminine principle would be missing. So we look at the idea of women's rights here, right? Now the question is, the reason why I did all this is to understand what is a civilizational state. Because what Aurobindo is asking for, what Gandhi asks for, both of them are asking for a possible vision of a nation within this idea, a civilizational idea. Ambedkar would ask for it in terms of a modern democratic process. All right, there's a crucial difference here. Yeah, because Ambedkar is talking about equitable equity among people. He's talking about breakdown of caste barriers. He's talking about economic capital. All right, he's talking about recognition. Right, he's talking about in that change of society, which is absolutely late. It's a product of the late Enlightenment, actually. All right, so this ideas of égalité, liberté, fraternité that comes out from the French Revolution. It comes out via the American Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Principle, a number of things that are happening is informing this particular discourse very, very early. So, what is a civilizational state? Because this would be very different from the nation state construction. Remember, for example, India is a civilizational idea. China has a civilizational idea. We don't have a nation state idea, right? When we're looking at it, we function as nation states. Remember that you have to. That you have to. You negotiate. You negotiate your diplomacy as a nation state. You make your purchases, you engage in trade, you export, you import as a nation state. Yes, you have to. But the underlying principle within which a nation state operates in terms of consciousness is a civilizational idea. Right? So, how do we define this within international relations? Because we are talking constantly talking about this, isn't it? We are talking about India. We are talking about its cultural past. We would like to bring back the Indian values, the value systems, so many things. Right now, it sounds great, but in terms of good academics, I need to bring a framework for it. All right. Otherwise, nobody's going to publish me. To be honest. So unless I have a very well defined methodology within which I'm going to discuss Indian values, it's not going to work. It's not going to work in terms of an academic presence, whether it's for a student or for the teacher. So we need to understand this the idea of the civilizational state. So when we say civilizational state, we're talking about certain unique characteristics that define that nation state. You know, those characteristics will be cultural, it's historical, and more than politics, more than the idea of territory. Remember, it is what I mentioned. It's a civilizational identity that's going to define you. All right. So it's not the question of a political idea of a nation state. All right. It's not a territorial idea either. We're not looking at it. It's not so important. What's important is the civilizational identity. Now, what constitutes civilizational identities? If you look at the key characteristics, you're looking at the idea of cultural heritage. You're looking at the idea of shared values, and you're looking at historical narratives to understand this. Yes, and you reject also at some places, at some times, you also reject Western centric models of nation states. Right? So often I hear this at times that people will just, in a very blind way, say the nation state is a European construct, it's a European import, so we don't have to follow it. Good enough. Good enough. But what are you going to replace it with? What's the specific methodology within which you would replace it, right? How would you write on it? How would you how would you make it relevant in academics today, right? So just a blind rejection of the West is not going to help. So what you actually need is to evolve a methodology within which certain things could be understood. So this is just one example. It's a possible way. So you can say, if you would like to contest Western-centric models, then this particular framework of a civilizational state could be an entry point to try and understand it. So the basic ideas of a civilizational state came out through a particular work that was published in 96. It was called The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington. Right? Now, two major thinkers at this time dominated Western theory of the nation state. There was a man called Francis Fukuyama who talked about liberalism and the end of history. All right, so that was something he talked about. The end of history, in the sense not history ending, but let us say the teleological idea of the event reaching its culmination. So every event would have its culmination somewhere. And he was looking at the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism and a possible replacement of that by liberal regimes and liberal democracies. That was the thesis Francis Fukuyama had. But Huntington has a more drastic vision. So when you say clash of civilizations, he's looking at it. He's bringing back your medieval Europe again, right? He's bringing back the Crusades again. So he's talking about a world where you're going to have Islam and Christianity getting into a state of clash, right? And it's not just the idea of two religions clashing with each other, but what he is talking about is it's not just religion. He says it's an idea of your civilization, right? So the Islamic notion of a civilizational state and a Christian notion of a civilizational state is something that's going to clash, right? And a lot of this, he says, is rooted within your histories. It's rooted within the idea of cultural continuities where certain ideas are constantly watered, right? So people would constantly water certain ideas within history. So you like to keep the idea green, right? So you bring it down. If it transforms through time, beautiful. But if it doesn't transform through time, then it's dangerous. All right. So the whole idea is when we talk about civilizational states, the idea of sovereignty is not attached to your idea of territory or it's not attached to your idea of the form of government, uh, your policies, and so on and so forth. So sovereignty in a civilizational state would be attached to your idea of identity, your civilizational identity, right? Now this makes it very can become very potent because we can also talk about majoritarianism here. We can talk about minoritarianism here. A number of things can come in. As I said, this is just an introduction. All right. So your civilizational identity, right? So it's not your idea of a Westphalian state construct in the sense nation states came in. Your modern idea of a nation state came in with the Treaty of Westphalia. All right. So your Westphalian peace. That's how we understand it in nation studies. So your Westphalian peace is responsible for your nation state. So how are you going to look at it? All right. At the same time, remember the last point here. When you say a global nation state, it would look at political unity, yes, while a civilizational state would look at cultural depth. Okay. I give a couple of examples here. For example, India is a civilizational state. So, I mean, it's an old civilization, so I won't repeat what I did yesterday. So you have your Hindu period, you have your Buddhist period, you have your Mughal influences, you have South India, a number of things. You also have a modern narrative today. So we're talking about Bharat as a narrative today. You also see this huge emphasis on the idea of health, well-being. Artha, Kama, and Moksha, the three cornerstones around which discourses are built. You have the modern narrative. You also have a global impact. But a lot of what we are seeing today is tied to the civilizational idea. If they look at China, 5,000 years of continuous history, all right from the heart. Uh, Look at the modern narrative. You have Xi Jinping, who's the president of China, and his One Belt and Belt and Road Initiative. We're looking at his ideas of recreating the, the Silk Route, the Qing Empire, the Ming Dynasty, that particular period, Ming to Qing. All right, he wants to recreate that entire Chinese vision. So if you look at China, it's a communist state, yes, but within Chinese characteristics. All right, so it's going to have a bit of Confucian values. It's going to try to like to emphasize that it had huge impact on Europe during the medieval, the Silk Route period. At the same time, it's going to reject Western models. China is an autocracy, all right, in a way. India is a democracy. It's a federal structure, what we have here. So your context within which you understand your civilizational status would be very, very different. The Chinese way would be very different. The Indian way would be very different. But the key emphasis would be on prioritizing your cultural idea, the cultural depth. Am I making sense so far? Before I move to Aurobindo?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, what happened? Where did the rest of it go?
Yes, okay.
Just need to find the rest of my slides. Uh, yes, two of my slides were deleted, I suppose, 80 minutes. Oh, yes, it's here. Now, I'm coming to the next stage of it, though. Right? If I'm understanding a nation today, the idea of a nation state today, we will normally understand it within post-colonial discourses. So you may estimate Aurobindo within post-colonialism, you would estimate Gandhi within post-colonialism, and so on and so forth. Now, what are the limitations? Limitations are, as I said, as I mentioned yesterday, the basic problem that post-colonial discourse cannot exist without the idea of the binary. So you need the bad guy, you need the good guy, right? To some extent, Homi Baba did try to bypass that binary, right? So when he's talking about the idea of colonial mimicry, when he's talking about the idea of the nation and so on and so forth, you'll find it absolutely ahistorical, right? How do I put in the components to understand Baba's discourse and Gandhi or Aurobindo? It's extremely difficult because the theory there is not a specific idea, right? But that was precisely the reason why Baba did it. In the sense, he wanted to bypass that binarism of that informs post-colonial discourse. I mean, and you see it across. I mean, you look at Said, you look at Abdul Jain Mohammed, you look at Partha Chatterjee, you look at Ashish Nandi, uh, Dipesh Chakravarti, all right, look up the entire range of post-colonial thinkers, and you will find this problem that you always have the problem of the binary. It's impossible to take a stand away from the binary, right? So in a sense, what you do find within post-colonial discourse is synthesis of some kind is near impossible, all right? You're always left you're always left with the notion of victimhood or with the idea of nationalism. Any one of the two things happen. Either you are look at yourself and your condition within the larger rubric of victimhood, or you would have nationalisms informing your discourse. Right? So it's not organic enough. So when I say an organic response to understanding the notion of the nation state and how do you respond as a citizen within that nation state is something that Aurobindo is talking about. He's asking you to get out of these ideas, political ideas, and he's going to do it across his writings. He says just an idea of politics and political activism is not going to help you achieve a state of synthesis. Yes? Alright. And this is why, let me take a second point first here. And this is precisely because you have a problem between political reform and social reform. Right? Now, this entire period from 1920s to 1947 and even today is how do we look at Indian society? How do I understand? Oh, no, there are two ways to look at it. There are two ways to look at it. One is the primordialist way. So I would look at Indian society as static. I would see Indian society as something unchanging, and I see it as a constant. Yeah, and and you assume that it's been like this ever since the dawn of civilization. All right, so that's a primordialist view. The second view that you can have is a liberal progressive view, where you're estimating the individual, the time period, the political constructions that construct that individual, the policies that construct that individual, and so on and so forth. Right? In a sense, let's say it's more modern in that way, where you're trying to understand the individual, today's individual, with the rubric of today. Right? So you're looking at the individual today within the social conditions that inform that individual today. So you don't have to go back in the past. Right? So you're going to look at it in today's terms. So today's terms, of course, when you look at liberalism as a way, it's going to talk about social equity, it's going to talk about economic equity, it's going to talk about citizenship, it's going to talk about democratic principles and so on and so forth. Number of things that inform what is citizenship today. Right? If I talk about social reform, now you have a problem. This is where the problem is. Because political reform has happened, but your social reform is always late. Your social reform never takes place on time. And this was a problem right from day one. Right from day one. Ambedkar had a massive problem with this. Gandhi had tried to engage with it. Aurobindo tries to engage with it. All right, they would love to reduce this gap that exists between the idea of social reform and political reform. All right. Now, for example, how does Ambedkar look at it? Ambedkar was was very astute when you're looking at this kind of a discourse. I mean, you had the Indian National Congress. You also had the Indian Social Reform Party at that time. And at every moment, Ambedkar says it was the political that took precedence over the idea of the social. Yes? So, across, if you look at modern Indian history, across what you're seeing is there's always been the political idea that has that has taken precedence over the idea of the social. Yeah, so society does not change. The problems of societies remain, and the idea of the political construction of the society always moves ahead. There's always a gap between the two. Gandhi tried to address it, but Gandhi tried to address it, and he addressed it through certain ideas. He addressed it via his notion of ahimsa. He addressed it through his idea of the ashram. He addressed it through the idea of passive resistance. That he wrote a book called that, called Passive Resistance in South Africa. He tried to address it through that. He tried to address it through the Upanishads. All right. Uh, so he goes back to the Upanishadic idea of the self, the idea of the transformation of the self. He goes back to the Upanishads. He does not come to sectarian Hinduism, remember. He does not come to Vaishnavism, or he does not come to uh, Shaivism when he's looking at the idea of the self. He goes to the Upanishads, right? He goes there. Even his notions of Vaishnava Janto, Temere Kaiye, Vaishnava Janto is not a Vaishnavite. The idea of Vishnu with Gandhi is like Kabir's Ram, right? So Ram with Kabir is a generic idea. Uh, Vaishnav or Vishnu with Gandhi is a generic idea. Ambedkar, Ambedkar campaigned against this. His biggest problem with the Indian National Congress and Gandhi at that time was this gap, that they could not address this gap between political and social reform. Aurobindo talks less on the social, right? But he very consistently talks about how you cannot have a political idea of a nation. For Aurobindo, it's a civilizational idea. For Ambedkar, it was a political idea. All right, so he had a political solidarity of of the Pune Pact and the post-Pune Pact. For Gandhi, it was a political idea. You needed freedom. All right, so Quit India movement was a political movement. All right, Aurobindo, no. Aurobindo is very clearly with the idea that that the civilizational idea is very very clear for them. It's less about the political at this time. He says because as I said, Aurobindo is going to change in a big way. So if you're going to look at the early Aurobindo in the revolutionary period, you will find the political ideas coming out very strongly. The moment you come to the later Aurobindo, you're going to find that the political diffuses a bit, and it's the self and the civilizational process that is more important. So in that sense, Aurobindo becomes closer to Vivekananda and becomes closer to Tagore. All right, uh, closer to Tagore, because Rabindranath Tagore had rejected the idea of the nation and nationalism. Right, he found it very very troublesome. He wrote a book on that. Very very troublesome. Vivekananda does not talk about the nation at all. It's still too early to talk about the nation, right? In terms of political consciousness, he does not talk about the nation, but he talks about the self. He talks about the community. He talks about in India. And he talks about it in a civilizational idea, as a civilizational idea. Am I making sense, people?
Sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. So how does Aurobindo look at it within this? See, now how would you discuss spirituality? Well, this is a big problem when you're looking at civilizational discourses. How do I quantify spirituality? Very, very difficult. Now, if I say a person is religious, I can understand. Yes, in the sense he follows certain codes of conduct or moral codes of conduct that are informed within a particular religion, right? So you can be a Hindu, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Buddhist, you can be a Sikh, or you can be a Jew, whatever. All right, uh, you can understand that. how would you quantify the idea of the spiritual? Is a problem, isn't it? Huge problem. Because we can't deny that spirituality is not a part of the other religions. It's present in all the religions. Yes. So certain ideas. So that's why I said 1920s, 1930s. When you're looking at these discourses, we need to make it a little more relevant today in the contemporary period. So, if you're looking at Aurobindo's vision of spiritual wisdom, spirituality, and he's writing in the 1920s and 30s, how would I make that idea relevant today in 2024? That is the question. That is the question. Yes? Is everybody understanding this?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So the idea is, as I said, it's a possible vision. So it was the idea of spiritual wisdom. So you're going back to the past. You're going back, let us say he's going back to the Vedas, he's going back to the Upanishads, he's going back to yoga, the idea of integral yoga. All right? Vivekananda does that by going back to the Upanishadic idea. Gandhi goes back to the Bhagavad Gita. He also goes to the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, there's a very Christian, at the same time, there's a very Upanishadic idea also. It's a beautiful synthesis for Gandhi. But they're going back to the past, right? Now, why would you do this? Now, these are a number of questions as research students you need to be taught to ask, right? Why would you do this? Why would you go back to the past today, 2024? Very uncertain world, lot of conflict, right? Your entire notion of citizenship is challenged. The entire world order is changing. Your international system is not the same. Your unipolar, bipolar worlds have gone multipolar today. Everything is different, and we want to go back to bring back a vision. Now, why are we doing that? How are we going to integrate it within the present system? That is the question. Yes. So it's not enough. So that's a larger problem. That's a larger problem, right? My biggest problem was this: how do I make it relevant? Uh, Otherwise, it becomes universalistic. That's the larger problem because these ideas are not political ideas. So when I say civilizational, cultural ideas, they are not political ideas. No, these are ideas that are intimately connected with the notion of the individual self. So it's individual people who have to go back. So when Aurobindo is talking about this, or Gandhi is talking about this, right? Or Vivekananda is talking about this, he's not talking about this in terms of a political idea of spirituality or a political idea of going back into the past. It's impossible. It's impossible. I can't even define the idea of the spiritual because spiritual or spirituality is not connected with a single religion. It's a state. It's a state of mind, right? It's not connected with certain codes, moral codes of do's and don'ts. The spiritual idea is a state. So, is it possible for a political solidarity to be built around a state of mind? That's very difficult. Very, very difficult. So, when they're talking about it, you need to understand that they're looking at it in terms of the individual self. All right, as an individual, you need to access this idea of spiritual wisdom. And that can be done. That can be only be done if people are introduced to it, isn't it? And that is something what our NEP has done. The new education policy is trying to do. It's trying to bring back this within value systems, within the ambit of the students, so that they would understand what it's all about. Because it's a very different world today, remember. The Upanishadic world is a different world. The Rigvedic world is a very different world. Yes? Today it's 24. The entire conditions of 2024 are very different, the 21st century. So how do I make all this relevant? That is the point. Yes. So Aurobindo looks at it. So we need to understand this as Aurobindo does. It's not a static idea. A civilizational idea is not a static idea, it's a dynamic idea. Right? And dynamism happens only when there is change. So civilizations, if you look at the civilizational history of India, you would find that there has been dynamic change across. So Buddhism grows in, Jainism grows in, sectarian religions grow in. You have the Bhakti period coming in, a large number of changes that are happening within this civilizational process. Yes? So that is the possibility of rebirth which Aurobindo is talking about. He's talking about it not in terms of a political idea of freedom. He's not talking about India's independence, 1947. No. He's talking about the rebirth as a reawakening of consciousness. All right, so where every citizen of India is aware of the civilizational status and is able to access its core values. Am I making sense, people?
That's it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Aurobindo looks at the idea of political freedom because remember his problem was he was implicated in the Alipur bomb case and he was about to be arrested. So he moves to French Pondicherry and that's where he stays. Right? He stays there till he passes away in 1955. And because it's French territory, the British government cannot touch it. All right, he establishes Auroville there, and he's able to look at the political freedom of India. Right. So he, for him, a political freedom is only a step. Right. So even independence for Aurobindo, it's a necessary idea, yes, but it was not a sufficient idea. So, in the sense, if you look at point two, he says you needed to move beyond the idea of political liberation, right? And to access what would be freedom, all right? So, something like Gandhi's Swaraj. Swaraj would mean this it's a cultural idea, it's an intellectual idea, it's a spiritual resurgence. The Swaraj. Same way what Aurobindo is talking about. They're all understanding this. They're all understanding. But even Ambedkar also understood this. But he had a huge critique on it because all your ideas within the cultural history of India, within the Ambedkarite discourse, would be a history of oppression, isn't it? Because a lot of your codes within the Smritis are talking about segregation of society and so on and so forth. Yeah. Uh, why that happens, how that happens, and what is a critique for that, it will be a space for some other talk. I can't do it today, but I mean, there's no scope for that, so I won't do it today. But what they're talking about is this idea of freedom. So the freedom has to be the cultural idea. It has to be the intellectual idea. It has to be a spiritual resurgence. It cannot just be a political idea of independence. All right. So that was very, very crucial. All right. So I think my talk is getting very good. We'll have space, a lot of space for discussion today. Right. Am I audible, please?
Yes,
Yes,
sir,
sir.
you are audible.
Yeah. Now, more or less, I'll be concluding here. Like, what would be the challenge, according to Aurobindo, to this idea of the rebirth of the nation? Okay. Now, these are two basic terms. Materialism, westernization is a very common idea that you will find in the 19th century. In responses against colonialism of the 19th century. The reason is westernization was understood as somewhere a direct challenge to your way of life. It was seen as a direct challenge to your civilizational status. It signified change within the way you were looking at time and history in a big way. Materialism definitely was a problem because materialism is capitalistic, isn't it? So the capitalistic notions would be very, very against this idea, which has dominated India. You know, the idea of Atkam and Moksha, where the ultimate state of achievement is not a Rolls Royce. It's a state of self-realization, right? It's moksha, which is the ultimate category. So materialism and westernization is understood in a very superficial way. Now, this is still a very superficial understanding. As I said, the biggest fear has been that somewhere, westernization and materialism would decenter or would create problems for a civilizational understanding, right? So it's like why should I not wear blue jeans, right? No, blue jeans is absolutely US in that sense. 60s US, right? How does it affect you? How does it affect the nation state, right? What does it mean? Something you're talking about cultural loss. That's a bigger fear, in the sense high materialism, high westernization would take you away from your civilizational understanding of India, your the civilizational understanding of the history of thought within India. So that's the bigger problem. All right. So it's basically a fear of loss in a way. At the same time, something replacing something. So the idea is somewhere colonial modernity replaced uh, Indian tradition, right? So your modernity replaced tradition to some extent, and after political independence, you would like to reclaim your traditions back. All right. So there's always a challenge between materialism and westernization and your civilizational idea. There's always a challenge between the two. There's no resolution for it. Remember, there's no resolution for it. The resolution would be we are going to ban westernization, we're going to ban Western movies, we're going to ban Western culture, we're going to ban Western TV programs, we're going to ban this, we're going to ban that. So banning is not a solution. I mean, that's the only solution a modern discourse would have, a nation state would have, to challenge materialism and westernization. Rather, rather, it would be what Aurobindo, what Gandhi, they're all talking about, Vivekananda, they're all talking about. You need to make your civilizational idea more attractive. Yes? So it's not that you're going to ban westernization, you need to make tradition more attractive. All right? So it's like a choice. It's like a choice. So I have a cappuccino in front of me and I have some ginger tea in front of me. Yes? So ginger tea is better for me in terms of health. Yeah? A cappuccino might not be taste better, but might not be very helpful. The ginger tea has no sugar. Right? It's just plain tea. It's going to be bitter. But it's very healthy for me. Now I need to make a choice between the two. And the ginger tea is going to lose out. Obviously. It's not packaged well. It's not been it's not been made attractive enough. Alright? So it has always been kept as the idea of the binary, within that structure of the binary. Now this is why tradition loses always. Tradition is always pitted as something against something else. Yes, tradition cannot stand as, or rather, tradition has never been explored within modern discourse as something that is standalone, something that can be done, right? So it doesn't have to be. posited against something. Fine. So if I want to make that ginger tea attractive, I need to package it better. Yes. Then probably people might move beyond westernization to look at an alternative discourse. Yes, I need to make it more attractive. It cannot be seen in a sense of conflict all the time. All right. The second problem that would be a challenge. And remember, uh, these are ideas that were somewhere in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, right? This is during the nationalist period, where the idea of cultural identity was too crucial, right? So you need to remember to periodize your ideas. So when I say loss of cultural identity, now globalization did that. That's the biggest problem against globalization. So globalization, your ideas of tradition, your ideas of civilizational status will always be in a state of clash, right? Globalization would like to homogenize things. It would homogenize cultures. It homogenizes the flow of knowledge because, as I said, internet has brought in a flatter world. So it would democratize a number of things. Yes, but what are the challenges to it? The challenges to it would be what I said, what I mentioned. Caste would challenge it, religion would challenge it, politics would challenge it. All right. So because remember, all these three ideas, caste, religion, and politics, emanate out of tradition. They come out of your religious texts. It comes out of tradition. So how are you going to address that? Is a huge question, right? Because I need to understand Aurobindo and the contemporary. There's no point looking at it just in 1920s, 30s. So how can the Aurobindo's vision or Gandhi's vision or Ambedkar's vision address the problems of caste today? How does it address religious strife today? How does it look at the idea of politics that comes out of it today? If it doesn't, then we need to move forward. That's a larger idea. So that is what I meant by this idea of civilizational history yesterday. We Indians, in terms of memory, have picked up certain ideas, have used it when necessary. When they found that it was not necessary, you forgot your periods of history. All right. So it's not as if you have lost your sense of history. It's just that certain aspects of history might not be relevant for you today. All right. So that's how I understand it. And what was Aurobindo's possible solution for it? He said you need to find unity in diversity. We understand this in a massive way today. All right. So when we talk about democratic structures, when we talk about ideas of a political state and so on and so forth, we often talk about the cornerstones of democracy. It's equality, liberty, fraternity. When we say equality, liberty, and fraternity, we're understanding about citizenship rights, right? We're understanding about the nature of the states, right? Whether it's a Hobbesian state, a Rawlsian state, a Mauryan state. No. If you're going to look at Kautilya's Arthashastra, you'll get this idea of a Mauryan state. How are we going to understand this idea of unity? And how are you going to understand this idea of diversity? Very crucial challenges that happen to the idea of the nation, let me tell you. Very crucial challenges. Diversity is a massive problem because it will resist homogenization. It will not allow unity to happen. And you need to bring about this idea of unity within the notion of diversity. And the time is different. All right? The time is different. How would you look at it within constitutional norms today? The idea of unity. How would you look at diversity within constitutional norms today? Yes. At the same time, as a nation state, yes, The moment you move out of your nation state, how do you understand diversity? I'll just give you a brief example before I close. Today, I'm an Indian citizen. Yes. When I travel abroad, the moment I cross immigration, I'm no longer a citizen. The moment I hit some some state ahead in Europe, let's say England or mostly England, when I go to England, uh, suddenly my Indian identity is less. I'm seen within the Asian rubric, right? So I'm seen as South Asian and not hardly seen as Indian, right? I have breakfast in a Bangladeshi restaurant, in a restaurant that's owned by a Bangladeshi, and the cook would be a Pakistani, right? Probably the ideas of cultural, these ideas of cultural differences, these ideas of of uh, individuality in terms of your civilizational status might not function once you get out of your nation state, right? So you have you if you go down to Wembley, if you go down to places in London, you're going to find different South Asian families living together in the same area. All right, they're all seen as Asians. So you're so the kind of discourses that we are using are extremely localized. All right. Anyway, I would appreciate questions now if I can. Am I audible, please?
Um, yes, sir. Um, Hello.
Yes. I'm waiting. You're all audible.
Namaste, sir. So, my question is, now it's a little bit long, but I will make it short. But it's shorter. Oh, okay, fine. So, the civilization is always in the state of becoming, right? It is not. It is a process, more like a process, and not a static state. That means civilizational understanding, as you said it, would require a huge amount of resource and time. It would consume because now India, when we look at India as a civilizational state, it's not just Vedic text and Upanishadic text. There are lots of discussion, as we said, Vada that has happened, Purva Paksh, Uttar Paksh.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do we synthesize it? Because from the point of view of Mahatma Gandhi or Aurobindo or Vivekanand or Rabindranath Tagore, they all had a particular set of text from where they derived their knowledge or they constructed these ideas. But what about the different traditions, let's say Madhyamika or these type of which were an important part in the development of Indian philosophy?
I
Um,
absolutely agree with you. I completely agree with you in the sense we are going back. See, the idea of antiquity or the idea of primordiality is important always. So you can only legitimize your discourse by going to the earliest. Now, this is one major way of looking at it. So they go back, they normally go back to the Upanishadic idea, or they might go back to the Rigvedic idea, they might go back to the Puranic idea, right? What you would see within the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavata, and so on and so forth. You go back to it only because of a larger familiarity of the time, because you need to choose your time, remember. So at present, what you're finding is there's a particular choice of a time period within that long history. It's not possible. It's not possible to access the complete history of India. It's too broad. There are too many traditions that are happening. You mentioned Madhyamika, all right? So and Buddhism is not a major community within India. Within India,
yes,
Madhyamika,
sir.
yeah, Madhyamika would be seen more within Theravada, uh, countries within South Asia and Far East Asia. Even they don't look at Madhyamika too much. They would look at it more in the Theravada tradition, right? the Mahayanists within Mahayanist communities within India would look at Madhyamika to some extent. So it's
Yes,
what
sir.
so it's what you choose. It's what you choose within the time. As 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 I said, what you choose. So it's not as if the Madhyamikas are not important or the Shaktas are not important. It is just that at the present moment there's a choice for for a particular period. And the choice has been, right from the 1920s, has been the Upanishadic world and the Vedic world. And the reason also why they go for the Upanishadic and Vedic world is because of these huge translation projects that happened 40, 50 years earlier. Right? It was massively in focus. Are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Mishra Saab, abhi the room.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, in relation with Aurobindo and this idea of, um, can you take it as a kind of utopia or?
All right. All visions are utopias.
Uh-huh.
All right. That's why, as I said, my notion of a nation state is informed within via international relations, and less by post-colonial theory, to be honest. So if I'm going to look at it in terms of realism, it's always going to be an idea. You might achieve some some percentage of it, all right? But achieving 100% of that idea would be impossible because there's a constant state of anarchy around you, and you need to, in terms of not real politics, in terms of real politic, I need to engage with the anarchy. Yes?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, I asking that because there are some authors that they are talking in that sense of dystopia. They see
Yeah.
the future more as a dystopian world that are utopian in the sense of negative
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
futures
Yeah.
things.
When you say
Uh,
I mean, there are different usages within
mhm.
different terminological usages within different disciplines. So when I say anarchy with an IR, it would be dystopia with a literature. All right? The state of anarchy would be the same as the state of dystopia, actually. Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah? You getting me?
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Most welcome. Guys, anybody else? Mishra Saab?
Um, now, sir, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
So this idea of I might be wrong. I mean, there are both ways to look at it in both kind of arguments. But
Okay.
there was a kind of the problem of approachability of text, as I understand it, in 19th century, 18th, 19th, 20th century, in terms of Upanishad and all these traditional systems of knowledge, right? When we look at Ambedkar, let's say, there's this difference between Ambedkar and Aurobindo. So one could look at it in terms of the difference in the approachability of the text, Sanskrit text, let's say the traditional. Now there is also argument against it that no, it was open to all. But even if we look at it in that way, that it was not open to all, but in the modern time there is also this problem that the problem of approachability has turned into the problem of the necessity of approaching that they modern people they don't find it necessary to approach those texts, and even if they do they don't want to approach it in with all its complexity. And again, with the notion of AI, how do we really understand it? Because Aurobindo didn't think about AI, or if he did, I don't know about it. Please, sir, if you can comment on that.
See, all of them, whether it was Gandhi, whether it's Becker, whether it's Aurobindo, whether it's Vivekananda, came Munshi, I mean, name the thinkers. They all rooted themselves within a religious idea. Right? It was necessary. I mean, how else would you combat the politics of difference that came out with colonialism? Right? Racial difference, linguistic difference, cultural differences that were there within colonialism. The only way you could do that was to go back to your sources. So all of them are going to rely on religious texts and they'll be taking certain positions via the religious texts. Gandhi, as I said, does that through a synthesis of the Christian, the Sermon on the Mount, and so on and so forth. He's also going to look at the Upanishadic ideas via the Gita, and he will be trying to resolve resolve the political question, and he'll make some attempts to resolve the social question also. Ambedkar has a, a direct confrontationist problem. His problems are with the idea of the scripture itself. His problems are with the relevance of the scriptures itself. His his problems would be with the idea of social stigmatization, stratification that is coming out through the scriptures. All right. So Ambedkar might not take a take a stand where there is a civilizational idea involving the scriptures. His idea would be to critique the problems of civilization, not negate it. Ambedkar never negates the civilizational idea of India. He might negate the social evils present within that civilizational idea, or that is permeating through. So he negates that, and you would like to replace some aspects of that with your modern notions of citizenship. Okay? So he doesn't negate the civilization. He would like to replace a few decadent ideas or ideas which are not viable today with ideas of citizenship. Okay? Aurobindo would like he does not take a stand in terms of religion. Remember, nor does he look at scriptures the way Vivekananda did. Aurobindo goes to a spiritual plane. It's a difficult plane to explain, right? Because you're talking about a plane where you're not defined by religious texts, you're not defined by religious concepts, but you're defined by a universalizing state of mind, right? So when you say spirituality, you're talking about states of mind, right? And
Yes.
now coming to your IR, I mean, how do I relate that? IR is today, sorry, AI is today. How I mean, how would Aurobindo would have reacted to artificial intelligence? I mean, I don't know. I don't know because his ideas are coming from 1920s and 30s. We need to make it more relevant today. As I said, you need to make it more attractive, the civilizational idea. Otherwise, how would it compete against globalization? That's the point, right? You can't force feed it to people. You need to make it more relevant and make it more attractive as an option. All right? Are you getting me?
Yes.
Mm.
So my question was, could this AI become instrumental in this civilizational activity? That was my question.
Uh,
Okay, sorry.
see, if natural intelligence cannot understand civilizational status, all right, I'm asking an artificial guy to do it, all right. And now we look at society around you. It's driven by hatred at times. It's driven by communal strife. You have religious difference. You have social stratification. All right. We're also talking about some ideas of solidarity that are forming within India. The moment I move out of India, I have racial problems, right? I have the clash of the civilizations, that idea that's happening. Look at West Asia today, right? Now, how would I reconcile all this? You tell me. So, if an honest, conscious mind cannot do it, I can hardly expect artificial intelligence to do it. Can I?
Yes, sir, that's very true.
Yeah.
But more and more artificial AI becoming the, how to say, the most important, how to say, instrument of knowledge. So that's what.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is a paradox that Aurobindo's idea cannot be transferred like that. So, so, so
That's a problem. That's why I said it needs to be packaged better.
okay.
If we are trying to bring about, if we are trying to bring about a civilizational idea, then we need to package it better for people as an alternative. As I said, it's a choice between your cappuccino and some ginger tea. It's going to be bitter, but you need to package it better. That's all. If it fails, it just means that you haven't presented your idea well. That's what it
Yeah,
means.
But
true.
sir, I'm sorry,
Yeah. Tell
sir,
me.
how about this, the cost of transformation of this package that you are talking about? You know,
Uh, See, the cost can be huge.
because for example, I was thinking about yoga.
Yeah.
Yoga, I think it is a kind of, it has this process of transformation, but you know,
Yes. Yes.
it is
Yes.
good or not. How you think
See,
about it?
the idea is it has been going on for a long time, right? I mean, we had this huge tradition of exporting yoga across since Vivekananda. Vivekananda did that in America. Then you had Paramahamsa Yogananda and his mission that happened. Then you had Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, with which it happened. Then you have the ISKCON movement that happened in the 60s. You had any number. Today you have Sadhguru, you have Sri Ravi Shankar, huge movement. So it's not that attempts have not been made. Attempts are constantly being made to
Yes.
promote a certain idea. And it's been happening since the 19th century. Fine. Now, as I said, the challenges to the idea of a civilizational status are many. Because, as I said, the world is in a state of anarchy around you. In a state of anarchy, how could I promote a, a, a static, at the same time, a very dynamic idea? It's both. That's a paradox. It's both. It's also static, it's also very dynamic. How would I promote this idea of a civilizational status? Right? How do I package it? How do I make it relevant in the present century? That is the question. So it's good to study Gandhi, it's good to study Ambedkar, it's good to study Aurobindo. But remember, they are writing somewhere uh, in the 1920s and 30s. How do I bring them down today? How do I understand them in a modern context? That is the question. Yes? In the same way, yoga, what we're talking about, right? How do I package all this and present it in today's terms? All right?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Garima. Garima, you have a question or comment, something? Go ahead.
Sir.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell
So
me.
we have been discussing about how the civilization is in constant flux, and how the entire idea of this packaging and making it relevant to the contemporary world.
Yeah.
My doubt is that what Aurobindo was trying to do, I mean, this is what I understand so far, is that what he was trying to do was, withdrawing from politics and sort of a strategic repositioning of maybe seeking freedom through this critique of the entire materialism. But what is happening now is, in a way, this whole idea of packaging certain things and promoting, which is very important, and that's the only way I think. Isn't it also making us enter into the same line of thought of consumerism and materialism, that we are sort of exchanging our ideas, making it a product. So this
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
idea of making it universal versus this making it universalizable. So I have this doubt.
Terrific. All right. See, the moment that's why I said it's difficult to quantify spirituality, right? I can quantify religion. It's very simple for me to quantify religion. But when I say spiritual, it becomes absolutely the state of the impossible, right? Because I don't have any governing principles within religion that would govern spirituality. All right. But I need to make spirituality relevant today. Okay. Now I can only make it relevant by, as what you said, I have to encourage consumerism. Right? Now consumerism is the norm today. The conditions, as I said, spirituality has been utilized in a different way across time. Let me tell you. So let's say when your Rigvedic families were there, they understood dharma in a different way. Okay, when you had the Gupta period, they understood dharma in a different way. 19th century, they understood dharma in a different way. Today, I need to understand dharma in a different way. The times are different, the conditions that inform are very, very different. The challenges are different. Now, if I'm going to hold on to a vision that was articulated 1500 years back, or if I'm going to hold on to a vision that was articulated in the 1920s and 30s, it's not going to work. There are going to be challenges. Yes. Now, what works today is consumerism because there's a globalization that is on. Now, within this era of globalization, I need to present spirituality as an alternative to anarchy. Are you getting me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the dangers of consumerism is always going to be there, and it's not as if consumerism did not exist earlier. Remember, there's always a demand and supply all across. That's how social movements happen. Bhakti happened on account of a demand and on account of a supply. Same way could have happened earlier, isn't it? With Buddhism and Jainism.
Yes, sir.
Like certain philosophical systems, out of the seven philosophical systems, the Sat Darshana, only a few darshanas have survived. The rest of the philosophical systems saw a state of extinction, no? Like Ajivika philosophy is not seen today. Nyaya can be understood today.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
yeah, something like that. Tell me. Anybody else?
Thank you, sir.
Most welcome.
Anything else? Anyone, any questions?
So can I ask one more?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, just Sohail Tunvin, do you want to say something? Sohail Tunvin?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Go ahead after you, Shivaji. Yes.
Yes, sir. Morning all, and I want to share some doctrine of Christianity, which is called a Trinity. In Trinity, we have Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, and Holy Spirit. We assume that these are only one. So I'm just sharing this, and what I will move to the question part. And here, sir also discussed society or community try to avoid violence or war. I think that's and here we can see that the military rank or how can we say the weapons? Uh, Even India is ranked in the fifth. They are most used in like that. So yeah, I am not a citizen of India, but I also proud like that. So I think Indian will be more proud than us. So, but my question is why nations compete in weapons or military power, even though our concern is to avoid violence or war. That's my question.
Yeah. See, that's a tragedy, you know. In a sense, if you look at the history of civilizations, it's built on the idea of conflict across. So to say that any civilization has been a peaceful one, I mean, I haven't heard of it, to be honest. Now, that is the whole idea, because people have separated the idea of the cultural idea, the cultural civilizational idea, from your realist principles. That's why I said when you look at a nation state, you understand it within certain realist principles. Like India has a huge spiritual past, yes, but it's still it has the fifth largest army in the world, right? As you mentioned, yeah, that's the reality, and that has to be understood. Yes, so we got so that's a larger problem with when we are analyzing people from the past. We forget to make them relevant today, or we forget to test their relevance today. That's the problem, right? So, as I said, the world is always in a state of anarchy, and we need to negotiate that anarchy. Yes. So when Aurobindo and people are talking about a civilizational status, they're essentially talking about it in terms of the individual and individuals forming solidarities. So it's not possible for India to awaken its civilizational status if individual people don't start practicing it. It can't be policy. It has to be people practicing a civilizational status. Are you understanding me? It has to be the Chinese practicing their civilizational status. It can't be just policy. You can make a policy, yes, but you can't enforce it. How do you do it? Spirituality cannot be enforced if you're talking about the Indian case. Are you getting me?
Oh yes, sir. Yes.
The question is, how do you make it relevant in a contemporary sense? That's very, very crucial. Yeah.
Shivadi, you want to?
हाँ जी सर. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sir, so so I wanted to ask that you talked about packaging. So how post Aurobindo, um, it has been packaged in, let's say, cultural products, novels, poetry. Is there some kind of can we say some kind seek some kind of trend? Because in terms of world literature, let's say it's very important to bring this um, in that status, right? Well, I mean, it's also problematic, but with all its problems, how do we look at it in that sense? So, is there any, is there some kind of trend, some kind of movement in terms of this spiritual literature or film movements or some kind of that? So, that was my question. Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. I think sir left the meeting.
Oh, sorry, sorry. Hmm.
Am I audible here, please? I just lost my Wi-Fi. That's a problem.
Yes, sir, you're audible. So, so,
Ah,
so what, so was my question clear, sir, or
oh, I
shall I?
hear it. I lost my Wi-Fi, so you could just.
Okay, so
I,
it was a very, very, very brief question, sir. So, after post, let's say, Aurobindo, do we see any movements of literature, specific movements of literature and criticism, or some kind of production of culture, where these ideas are instilled, or we can see the effect of these ideas as a different movement? Uh,
oh, okay. See, you have a number of organizations, right? Because I haven't explored that particular area out too much, whether people are actually practicing it. There are a uh, number of small religious movements that are keeping the idea alive. At the same time, you're also having a larger political solidarity happening now that's trying to look at the idea. But as I said, you need to make it absolutely relevant today, right? As to how do you package it, how do you make it attractive to the generation next? It's a millennial generation. How would they receive it? Because as I said, the biggest challenge would be globalization and the consumerism that comes out of globalization, right? And you need to somewhere make it more relevant for people to understand it, to understand mental states of mind, right? You need to go beyond frames of religion for it. Because the moment I get into spirituality, you're going beyond the frames of religion. You need to do a large number of things. How does it happen ahead? I'm not too sure. If it happens, all the best for it. Yeah.
no, sir. So my question was in terms of literature. So do we see any writers emerging? I mean, not as a
Literature.
religious movement, but as a literary movement.
Uh, no, right now, you have a lot of political commentators working on it, right? But I haven't seen anything authentic or original coming out today, right now, because we are
Okay.
still we are still engaged with the time period, right?
Okay.
A huge number of critics are still engaged with that time period, but present. I don't think we have reached that stage where we can say, okay, let's say the age of Aurobindo, Gandhi, and Ambedkar is over. They're no longer important for me. We haven't yet reached that stage as yet. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Welcome.
So, any other comments, questions from first year students? Sure. So, as we all have seen, it's a very, very engaging session, sir, and you have seen the mind being lit up. People are now thinking in different terms, and that is very important.
Yeah.
And something that we discussed today, it is actually in the foundation of the entire Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
When we touch Southeast Asia, any nation, any culture, anywhere, these are the issues that we face. We have not mentioned many, but you have hinted at some of the ideas that we can discuss. We go to Indonesia, you have similar ideas being discussed at its foundational level. So we are grateful, sir,
Thank you,
uh,
sir.
this for this lecture. And
Yeah.
tomorrow we will meet with something completely different.
Yeah.
Not different exactly, but it's a continuation of the same because the
Yes.
issues are there. The issues are in the foundation itself of the entire South Asia. And entire South Asian countries, they're trying to figure out these issues in different ways. So
Yes.
some of the responses to it we can discuss because we respond to the same issues differently. As there was a question also that you decide that there is one Father Ghost, the whole concept, Holy Trinity. But in political terms, it doesn't work.
Mm.
Even if you believe exactly in the same text, the same Bible, you have still factions. You will still have different dates for Christmas. So the notion of the sun is not the same. among the entire Christian world. So we look at it in our own ways, and what are the possible responses that we will get to. And perhaps this difference is the beauty of the human civilization or human mind, because without this difference, perhaps we cannot exist. The modernist thinking somewhere tried to overcome the differences, and very soon we realize that no, it doesn't work. So we have to celebrate the differences. So how to come to terms with the differences in each area, while understanding and taking the whole global, as you said, sir, that this is a global world, it's a kind of a global village, and how to make sense of those ideas which preceded the concept of a village uh, that we find in the whole world. And now you see there is that Indian concept which is, we are trying to make relevant, from global village to global family. And Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that's the slogan, that one of the new slogans that we hear often. Sabka Saath, Sabka Haath, Sabka Vikas, and all of these kind of slogans. And they get a reverberation all across the world, from US to Australia. So, so there is some change, and how to understand these changes in our contemporary times, and how they get reflected in the literary thought, because political thought and literary thought are very closely connected in every time of the history. Even today, if you go back, the texts of Julius Caesar are one of the best examples of Latin literature, and actually they are the speeches of a great general. Julius Caesar was a great general. So we have these issues. So tomorrow, sir, we will meet with one of the possible responses of our contemporary minds to all the issues that we face in our
Definitely, sir.
thought. Okay, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, sir.
All the best. Yeah, yeah, yeah.